What if I told you in 2018, pot was made legal?
Today, we're introducing the Hemp Farming Act of 2018.
So now it's my great honor to sign the 2018 Farm Bill. Very special.
The 2018 Farm Bill loophole. No one ever intended to legalize all this stuff that we're seeing. I take issue with that for a number of reasons.
What is THCA, and then what is the loophole exactly?
THCA proceeded to arrest Lee, and Pierre interfered, causing a...
We can remove much of the confusion.
And Casey, how can officers know the difference?
Well, short answer is there's no way to tell the difference, at least by looking at it. Drug dogs can't even...
Mitch, I hate to break it to you, but yeah, absolutely made this way more confusing.
Very special, important piece of legislation. Thank you, Mitch. Very good. Thank you all.
Today, we'll solve this problem and get the federal government out of the way of this promising market. I do not have any plan to endorse legalization of marijuana.
Things like this were able to be sold online legally, and still is.
We're going to do our best to implement that bill as you've intended. Thank you. God bless you.
Confusion.
This is the story of THCA, a story that in a lot of ways came out of nowhere. But just like I always talk about in some other videos, nature finds a way to balance things out. And that'll make sense here later on in the video. But let's bring it back all the way to 2017. It's about 1.5 years, 2 years into the Trump presidency, right? And they're coming up on the midterms. And Trump and Mitch McConnell, mainly Mitch McConnell, really wants to get this bill done called the 2018 Farm Bill. And it's specifically targeted to make sure that folks in places like Kentucky are able to start to rejuvenate the agricultural sector that's been in a lot of ways destroyed.
Farm bills, by the way, are just huge bills. They're almost 1,000-page long that sort of address most aspects of agricultural policy in the United States, from dairy farming to plant subsidies and, on and on. And in 2014, there was a very short provision that removed from control, meaning the Controlled Substances Act, something that it called industrial hemp, which was, the plant cannabis sativa with no more than 0.3% Delta-9 THC that was produced pursuant to a state industrial hemp program. And that was the first time in almost 100 years that cannabis, a form of cannabis, was legalized. So it sort of snuck in through the back door, but it was a huge deal. And that ushered in the CBD hemp industry, which sort of really, when the 2018 Farm Bill came in, that we can talk about later if that's pertinent, really kind of blew things out and really created the industry that we have today.
And so I was on my email one day and I get an email from a lawyer, and he happened to see the clip from the burner interview that I did in which we talk about THCA. And Rod Kite is someone that, like I said, been heavily involved with THCA, is behind the legal theory of THCA in the country, at least, and someone that I really enjoyed talking to. That makes a ton of, I actually did not know about that. That makes a ton of sense. And
yeah, it was all kind of coming together, and what, the stalks and the non-germinating seeds have always been an exempt portion of the cannabis plant. Those have always been legal, and you can't really get cannabinoids from the seeds. And you can somewhat from the stalks. It's a very inefficient process because, of course, the stalks don't produce a whole lot of cannabinoids. But we had seen a little bit in the way of CBD that was at least ostensibly sourced from the stalks in Europe. But since you couldn't grow, cannabis legally in the United States, even though the stalks would have been legal, we didn't really see the U.S. industry emerge until the 2014 Farm Bill, because then you had the lawful authority to grow the cannabis plant as long as it met the qualifications for industrial hemp under a program. But not only that, but then you didn't have access to just the stalks, but then you could actually get the trichome rich buds and get the CBD from that. So that really started the CBD industry. But just to piggyback on what I'd said earlier, the issue was people said, well, is CBD legal? And, CBD is it's not THC. It wasn't coming from marijuana. It was coming from a form of cannabis that's now legal. And so the source said, well, if CBD comes from marijuana, which is the plant cannabis sativa in all of its parts, well, then it's illegal. But if CBD is coming from industrial hemp, which has been exempted, and CBD is not separately scheduled, well, then it is legal. And that was sort of the pathway that this whole hemp industry moved into.
The Hemp Farming Act of 2018 will do the following. First, our bill will finally legalize hemp and remove it from the list of controlled substances. By recognizing the difference in statute between hemp and its illicit cousin, we can remove much of the confusion facing farmers, producers, and state agencies. Second, the legislation will allow states to become the primary regulators of hemp if they can develop a plan to properly monitor its production.
Let's overview what Mitch McConnell was talking about first when he was kind of going over the bill, right? He said, we want to implement this system that's going to allow for industrial hemp. We're going to make it so that the cousin of hemp, regular cannabis, is going to still be outlawed. That states are going to be able to choose how to regulate their system, but if they don't know how to, or if they don't more so, then the U.S. Department of Agriculture, right, the feds, are going to regulate it. And that's a very interesting point, right? So if you go from state to state, there is different THCA systems, right?
Yeah, what you're seeing is, at a political level, and this is not just THCA, because THCA is still a little bit new to these lawmakers and attorneys general and stuff. I think it's really, they're still sort of focused on Delta 8 and this THCA. They by and large, I think it's some new synthetic cannabinoid. They don't understand it. But to talk about that, what they're doing, we're seeing two things essentially happen. One is that I'll break down to three things. One is you're seeing state legislatures that are enacting laws that are prohibiting these types of products, and specifically THCA. And they're doing it in a number of ways. One is they're prohibiting inhalable or smokable hemp. Two is they're imposing a total THC metric on the definition of hemp in the state law. The second thing is maybe the state legislature doesn't do that, but the regulatory bodies like the departments of agriculture and whatnot in these various states, they have rulemaking authority. So the legislature issues a statute. These agencies have the ability to take that statute and issue rules which are enforceable, contrary to Reddit popular belief, that are enforceable. They are laws that in order to help them regulate the statute. They can't go beyond the law, but they can create rules that sort of work within the law. And so we have these regulatory bodies often saying, well, the statute doesn't have a total THC test, but they're imposing a total THC test on products. That's what's going on, and it's one of the things that's going on in Florida right now. So that's the second thing that's happening. And then the third thing that's happening is you have governors and by and large attorneys general making these proclamations that certain hemp products are illegal, whether they are or not. A few years ago, I got into actually it was a good conversation with the South Carolina Attorney General over Delta 8. And Delta 8 THC in hemp is absolutely and unequivocally, at least if you read the statute, legal in South Carolina. And so but the governor was getting a lot of pressure from its law enforcement division and came out with a very twisted and bizarre legal opinion stating that it wasn't. And that's not enforceable as law, but it certainly carries a lot of weight. And so we're seeing attorneys general come out with these opinions that may or may not be well-grounded in law, but they certainly have a chilling effect on the industry. When the head law enforcement officer in the whole state says, this is illegal and we're going to prosecute you, you might step back. It takes some chutzpah to go ahead and continue to operate in that state. And you really got to feel like you are on the right side of the law. So again, not to get too deep, we could even talk about that a little bit more, but that's what I'm seeing. And I guess just to wrap this piece up here, we're seeing lawsuits that challenge that. And most notably, there was a lawsuit in Arkansas where the legislature enacted a law that really prohibited a lot of the activities that the hemp industry was doing and a lot of the products. The hemp industry sued and won. And what was what the court had a number of findings, but one of the biggest findings was, sure, a state has the right to issue regulations about products in the state, but it cannot redefine hemp. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of these lawsuits focus, is these states either explicitly or implicitly redefine hemp from what it means under federal law.
A lawsuit filed in an Arkansas court this week challenges a new ban on the sale of Delta-8 across Arkansas. It's a psychoactive substance found in marijuana and hemp. Act 629 went into effect yesterday and bans the sale of products like Delta-8 that are derived from hemp and potentially intoxicating. Now, that lawsuit is challenging the law and asking the court to file an injunction allowing sales to resume while the case moves forward. The lawsuit alleges the law is in direct violation of several laws, including the 2018 Farm Bill that legalized the production of hemp products containing less than 0.3% of THC content.
4 companies are suing the state of Arkansas for a new law banning hemp. Their attorney says this goes beyond just smoke shops and employees, but also farmers who are making a living with the plants.
I believe all of our clients support reasonable regulation of these substances. This law doesn't do that.
The attorney argues this law oversteps federal boundaries in 2 ways. First, President Trump signed the Farm Bill in 2018, which sets national standards for what hemp is and how it's produced. Second, it violates the protections of interstate commerce across state lines with the product.
That trucker, that employee, faces criminal sanction for having products that are now deemed to be illegal, despite what the federal law says. I believe the entirety of the act needs to be enjoined and set aside, and I think the legislature needs to come back and come up with something that's workable, that treats hemp for what it is, as an agricultural commodity.
Now, we have to talk about what is THCA and then what is the loophole exactly, just really quick. So in this bill, they said that anything that is higher than 0.3% Delta-9 is considered illegal, right? That means it's considered regular, traditional weed. But they said anything that's lower than the 0.3% is fine. And right there, that basis right there is where it gets confusing.
Confusion.
So we're gonna get to like the origins of like who figured this out potentially and what are the implications, but what somebody figured out is that they just said Delta-9 THC. They didn't say THCA, they didn't say Delta-8, they didn't say Delta-10, they didn't say all these other cannabinoids, right? So what happened is that people realized that almost all weed is gonna be fine as long as it's under that 0.3%.
Actually, what's interesting is we saw what is at least technically THCA flower shortly after the wake of the 2014 Farm Bill. I remember getting calls to my office in, 2016, 20 or so, when people were saying, hey, we're going to sell hemp flower for smoking. And at that time, I was like, really? Why? But then I started researching it and I tried some and whatnot. And I thought, this is great. And so there was a hemp flower market before the contemporary market of THCA flower. And a lot of that had high levels, well, higher than 0.3% THCA. It might have been 5% THCA instead of 15 or 20%. But we had a moment in time where we had, a version of THCA flower, years and years and years ago. But when we're talking about the contemporary market, I think your timeline is about right. 2019, 2020. And I don't remember when we wrote our first legal opinion letter. It might have been about a year after that, and after spending some considerable time consulting with clients and really looking into it and identifying all the possible risks and issues that we might have overlooked, that we put one out.
So you had clients in the hemp space though way before, right? Prior to, like in 2014.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then just fast forward, had clients that were, starting to get involved in Delta-8. They wanted to know if it was legal, and we looked at it and came up with a legal opinion for Delta-8 that pushed things even further down the path with the hemp industry, and going into what's now been known as the intoxicating side of things. And then I got a call from some clients about, going on 2 years ago, And they said, hey, Rod, we're selling this thing we're calling THCA flower. Here's the deal. Is it legal? And that's kind of just as an aside. It's funny. Some clients call and say, can I do this? And some clients say, I'm doing this. Is it legal? But some clients have different risk tolerance. But the good thing is they reached out to me. And, I looked into it and I felt really comfortable that THCA flower, which is just harvested cannabis material with delta 9 THC levels that are no more than 0.3%, but with high THCA levels, I felt very, very good about the fact that it was legal. It's not a controlled substance.
Now, we're going to get into this exactly right now, but I just want to ask you this question more so. Do you think that this bill and this loophole, do you think it was put there on purpose or was it a complete accident? That is the question I've been asking myself for months at this point.
Yeah, sure. People call it the loophole. So the 2018 Farm Bill loophole. No one ever intended to legalize all this stuff that we're seeing. I take issue with that for a number of reasons. First of all, it's just a basic fundamental thing you learn in first-year law school. When you read a statute, if the statute is clear and unambiguous, then the intent of the lawmaking body, in this case Congress, is irrelevant. It doesn't matter what Congress intended because the law is clear. The intent of Congress only comes into play if there's some ambiguity in the law. We have to say, well, this is ambiguous. Let's see if we can really figure out what Congress meant. But that's not the case. I mean, it's really clear what the Farm Bill says with respect to hemp. So from a legal standpoint, the intent argument doesn't make any sense. But let's step back and just talk about just what it says regardless of the legal piece. First of all, I think, and I firmly believe that there are lawmakers who are very pro-cannabis in Congress who are aware that trying to push through a bill to deschedule marijuana is just not going to happen. I mean, we're seeing that right now. But they said, oh, wait a second, this hemp thing is really big because all we're doing is distinguishing between illegal marijuana and legal hemp is the concentrations of one cannabinoid. This really opens up a lot. So it's certainly plausible. And I think it's fair to say that many lawmakers saw, at least on some level, what this could do and voted for it for that reason. I'm pretty confident Mitch McConnell didn't want to legalize intoxicating cannabinoids, but he's only one of 100 senators. Yeah. And then the final piece is, if you look at the definition, it's really specific. I mean, we're talking about extracts, derivatives, isomers, salts of isomers. I mean, we're getting into some really strong chemistry terms here. To think that someone was just, we're just trying to legalize, hemp for fiber, then why did you talk about cannabinoids? Then why did you talk about isomers and salts of isomers? So I take issue, for those reasons with this idea that the whole thing is a loophole that was never intended.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now that you say that, like, you're right. That's getting very technical and very specific, and it's getting into the more consumption side, non-industrial. Yeah. Which is interesting.
So technically, this right here, they test every batch, right? But this could be considered just THCA. Now, THCA is the ingredient before it's been decarboxylized, right? So when you eat edibles, it's been decarboxylized, meaning that it's been heated up, right? This is THCA. But when you start to heat it up, you heating it up, that is actually now it's being converted into regular THC. And that's what makes it illegal, technically, right? So technically, if it's not smoking, legal. Technically, illegal. Now, this gets really, really confusing. Right?
Confusion.
I mean, what about if somebody walks into, just actually, you know what? Here's a good example. Check this out.
Christina Pierre and Anthony Lee claim they were smoking legal hemp at a bus stop on West Arrowwood in November when police approached them.
Oh, it smells like you're smoking weed. Well, this is stuff from the store. They sell it in the store. It's THCA. You smoking weed? You guys smoking weed? It's coming from the store. I can smell it coming from that.
The officers proceeded to arrest Lee, and Pierre interfered, causing a massive police response, a viral video, and now a suspended police officer.
And Casey, how can officers know the difference?
Well, Short answer is there's no way to tell the difference, at least by looking at it. Drug dogs can't even sniff out the difference.
The substance that they were in possession of was certainly illegal marijuana.
Lab results from CMPD's crime lab show the substances tested positive for marijuana THC. But hemp lawyer Rod Kite says the lab used a gas chromatography test, creating flawed results.
What the lab did that tested this particular sample is it actually created illegal marijuana from legal hemp. In other words, it created the very compound that it was looking for. And in creating that, it then determined that this was illegal marijuana, even though it was only illegal marijuana because the test created it. However, now that hemp is legal, the test has to be different because now legal forms of cannabis, what we call hemp under the law, can contain THC. And so it's important that the test properly measure the amount of THC in a sample to determine whether or not it's legal.
When it comes to handling legal hemp flowers like what you see here, Chief Jennings says officers assume anything that smells like weed is weed until proven otherwise.
If we don't want officers to address misdemeanor marijuana use, then make it legal.
Confusion.
So that's one of the issues. But you raised an issue. You're talking about, shipping USPS or UPS or whatnot. We have a lot of packages that are opened and detained, particularly with the private carriers, UPS and FedEx and DHL and so on and so forth. They have a right contractually to open packages, period. They don't need probable cause to do that. And they will often open packages for any or maybe no reason. And we've seen the packages be opened. They shouldn't have been opened. The product is legal, but they get taken to a local sheriff in whatever station, whatever way station that product was in when it was opened. And then the sheriff thinks, oh my God, this is marijuana. We have a whole issue there. USPS is not, a lot better, but it is a federal agency that needs probable cause to open a package. And hemp is cannabis, so the mere, odor of cannabis is not sufficient probable cause. Plus the Postal Service has internal regulations on hemp. It theoretically at least knows what hemp is. So you have a little bit of a better outcome there. But in any event, we have, then you have issues with, particularly with a bigger shipment, where's the liability rest? You've got 10 pounds going from state X to state Y. It gets intercepted here and detained, and it's very, very difficult to get it, released from detention for a lot of reasons, mostly having to do with a lack of understanding and the testing methods that are used that we talked about earlier. Gets it detained, and let's just say for our purposes, it's you can't get it back. Well, who pays? Is it the person that shipped it and say, well, I shipped it the way that you asked me to ship it, purchaser, and it just didn't get to you, I'm sorry. Or is the purchaser say, hey, I paid for the product, it didn't reach me, I need a refund, or I need and those are issues that we're dealing with. And I think from a legal standpoint, that's one of the things that people need to be thinking about. Hey, when you write a purchase order or contract, you need to talk about risk, who pays and how do we deal with this issue in the case of it gets seized, because THCA flower is getting seized, folks. And, this is one of those risks that needs to be addressed.
Mitch, I hate to break it to you, but yeah, absolutely made this way more confusing. As you guys can see, very confusing, very contradictory, but really this, like I said, this is a loophole, right? Or whatever you want to call it. And people are going to take advantage of this. Now, there's been a lot of really interesting things that people have been doing to take advantage of this. And I'm talking about companies that are making a little under $1 billion a year. So I want to talk about some of the origins, though. Where did this originally start? Who found, this loophole? When did this kind of first start to bubble? Now, this is just one of many stories, and there probably are other stories out there. But I want to go, it took me a while. I tried to figure out, pinpoint, hit up a bunch of different people. I had to, scramble to find. But eventually, I talked to a very smart dude, and he gave me what he sees as the origin story of how, people found out this loophole. So let's talk about the origins of people discovering this loophole. Check it out.
So basically, and like I said before, this is just my version from my part of the country. I'm sure other people have different versions of how it came about. But for us, so around 2000, like the end of harvest season 2020, I want to say he was an Amish dude. in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and he had a hemp field out. And the story goes that somebody else in a neighboring farm had, a cannabis farm, which had some males pop those, and it essentially pollinated his hemp field. And so then you have like a cannabis plant cross-pollinating with a hemp plant, which it still held almost all of the same, the hemp characteristics and everything, but it did cause the THCA to get pretty high up there compared to what you would normally see just with like a regular CBD genetics. And then so that strain was called Franklin, and a lot of that was processed by a company in Clarksville, Tennessee called Veteran Grown. I want to say they're called Veteran Grown Hemp. And through that strain in August of 2020, a gentleman started a Cult of the Franklin subreddit. And then and essentially that's where THCA came about for a lot of people, and then a lot of CBD companies started to take note, and then we started seeing THCA come out pretty regularly, and now it's just basically.
And what year was that, by the way?
It was created at the end of 2020, and I'm gonna say I joined because I remember I joined the Franklin subreddit in the beginning of 21.
So, big shouts out to the homie that I talked to, Botanical Clouds. By the way, guys, if you actually want to go over to botanicalclouds.com, use my discount code LMC15. You're gonna get 15% off in your order. Go support the homie, small business, really great person. Definitely can't tell him how appreciative I am for his information, for supporting the show. Quality dude, quality product. Shout out over to all the people over in Tennessee and Nashville. And like I said, go over there, check out botanicalclouds.com, use my discount code LMC15, and let them know LMC sent you. And it's really interesting, right? Like we talked about earlier, kind of one of the two components to really THCA is, right, is one, keeping it cold. You don't want it to heat up because, right, heat and THCA equals what is illicit, delta-9 THC. And then the second one is genetics. Genetics are really important. So we went over to Herbal Refreshments and we looked at some of the different, genetics that he has been R&Ding. Because yes, genetics are important. Tell me about the process of you want to find the right genetics, right? That's a key component to it, or no?
Like when they say location, genetics.
That's all it really,
every day, all day.
And then making sure it doesn't get too heated up, maybe, right? A little bit, so it doesn't convert slowly into over that 3%.
Correct. I mean, you're always testing, you're always doing the research and making sure that you have those correct genetics. But that's what it really comes down to, knowing who you're getting your genetics from, making sure they're reputable and that they have, they can stand on what you're getting them from. But yeah, that's pretty much it, Yeah, right now, I mean, we pretty much have some staples that are bona fide THCA. They're fire, people like them, they respond to them. So we're just trying to make those better, those few right now. But we're always looking, we're always searching, trying to find those good genetics that are going to be THCA that we can cultivate. And so, we didn't take any time to pivot. We just pivoted and we were like, hey, we've actually got access to those. We made sure that they were, on point, something that we could work with. We wanted definitely a sativa, something light, something very terpene profile that's going to come right out the gate and make you kind of question everything. It's like, wow, this is what THCA is. So we looked for those two, something again, kind of a sativa and upper, and then we got something that you already smell, something just kind of flat out in your face, gassy, whoa, So we got those two. We really focused on making those really, really good. Now, as you see, we're bringing on other genetics that are THCA, and we're just trying to make those better now. So it's a slow process because we've had to throw away some strains that were just they were more hempy, kind of TH, you know, kind of CBD-ish, and it was just hard to cipher through those. So
this is still the riskiest aspect in the industry, right? This sector. Tell me more about
Yeah,
that.
it is. Yeah, sure. I think the risky piece has to do primarily with two issues. One is literally just a lack of understanding about what THCA is, you know, how the plant expresses, when the post decarboxylation total THC test applies, when it doesn't. There's just a lot of confusion, and I've heard some really, really muddled explanations and positions by people in power, people that really, if they're going to be making pronouncements about law, should absolutely know better and should make pronouncements unless they know. So anyway, so there's a lot of confusion about it. That's the biggest risk at all. And part of my mission, so to speak, as a cannabis advocate generally, and as someone who's advocating on behalf of my clients, is to try to dispel that confusion. And I got a lot of haters because of it, but that's fine. I'm just trying to say this is what the law says, period. The other issue is a technical one, and that has to do with the testing methods that are used. And so to dig in just a little bit on the details, when I say THCA hemp is legal at the federal level, people very often will say, no, Rod, you missed something, Rod. Look, let me show you. And they'll flip to the page in the statute and in the USDA rule that says that you must test using a post decarboxylation method, which most people have sort of accepted means a total THC method. And just to get a little bit clearer, which means the total amount of Delta 9 plus 0.877% of THCA, and that molar sum cannot exceed 0.3%. And I say, no, you're exactly right. In all 50 states, if you're growing hemp, you cannot harvest that hemp plant unless you've passed this post decarboxylation total THC test. And then they look at me and they say, well, then what are you talking about? And I say, well, the deal is once you've passed that test, you can harvest your plant. And that's it. You know, then we're out of the purview of the USDA. The USDA has fulfilled its duty. Its jurisdiction is over as a regulatory agency. And that specific part of the statute regarding the post decarboxylation test has also been satisfied. That post decarboxylation test only takes place in the context of production, which means cultivation. So once we get that material harvested, then we just look to the definition of hemp. Well, that's real easy. It's Delta 9. The DEA has said it over and over and over and over again, and so does the statute. And so then the question becomes more of okay, well, I get that, Rod, but you just said it passed a total THC test, so how can we have high levels of THCA? That gets into the botany of the plant. How does the plant express its cannabinoids? And I am not a botanist. I'm fortunate to represent some of the best ones in the world, and so I've got some explanations. But essentially what it means is, let's take a 30-day harvest window, and let's just simplify it. Let's say we've got, so the growers out there who are watching this, I'm not a grower, and I'm I'm giving a general example, but let's just use a 60-day autoflower plant. And, and let's say we're in a state like most states where you've got a 30-day harvest window. And what that means is you plant your plant, 30 days into the plant, you're 30 days away from harvest. So then you're going to take your post decarboxylation test. Well, guess what? You're probably going to pass that test pretty easily because 30 days into the growth cycle of a cannabis plant, there's not a whole lot of cannabinoids, period, of any sort. So you're going to pass that post decarboxylation test. Well, then during that 30 days, the cannabinoids are really going to start to express themselves. And so by the time you get to that day 60, where you have to harvest and the plant is mature, then you've got your full expression or close to it of the cannabinoids. And the only trick there at that point is just to make sure that your Delta 9 levels haven't flipped. And that's really difficult. There's a lot of ways to address that, from mechanical things. I'm using the term mechanical to refer to things like maybe colder than normal temperatures in the harvesting and curing, handling the buds differently, not exposing them to light as much, but also the genetics, and how the plant expresses the THCA and how likely it is for it to decarb naturally, and so on and so forth. I've kind of expended my knowledge of,
that's
genetics.
perfect. I mean, that's exactly what I've been told is really, there's two components to this that are really important. There's genetics, which almost are the most important, and then there's keeping it cold. So this kind of is a great time, I guess. So my business partners are on this call as well. We have a company called Space Weed, and I'm sure are you aware like the process of sublimation?
Fill me in a little bit more.
Lifelization.
I know.
It's really it's freeze drying, right? It's what it's.
Oh, right.
Does that process at all kind of in your in your knowledge of this come into play with with THCA and allowing for that?
Yeah, I think it does. But again, the once you've passed the first test, and I don't mean the THC test, but just the first obstacle, which is you got to pass this total THC test. The next obstacle is to keep it under that 0.3% Delta 9, and the biggest challenge is keeping that THCA from decarboxylating into Delta 9. So keeping it cold, keeping it out of light, and anything that you can do to keep it there is important. And THCA, well, there's all sorts of products that are made from the flower. It's not just the flower for smoking, vaping, juicing, whatever. But there's rosins and there's hash and there's all these other things. And so there's certain methods that are traditionally used that in and of themselves would be sufficient to decarb enough THCA to throw it over the limit. So even in making these sort of post-flower products, you've got to be careful, and then there's the whole issue of transporting them and storing them and on a retail shelf and so on and so forth. So it gets to be a little bit of a tricky proposition, but it's absolutely doable as we see a big market in THCA flower.
So keeping it, so really the frozen aspect of it is what contributes to helping maintain that THCA
That's right. Yeah. Heat is one of the major catalysts for decarboxylation.
Yeah.
And again, for the scientists say, if I used that term wrong, I meant that more. It is one of the things that can start that decarboxylation process. Heat is. I think
it's the main
light.
thing, right? Yeah. I mean, it's really like, to simplify it for people is really THCA add heat gets you Delta 9, converts into Delta 9.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
But now, this is a documentary that I've taken quite some time on, maybe a little longer than I should have, but I've traveled multiple different places for this documentary. One of those places being, I flew over to Kansas City to meet up with my boy, JC, at Dr. Smoke. Obviously, if you guys have watched any of my videos, you know that Dr. Smoke's been a supporter of the show. Without him, without his team, without the contributions, that they've made, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. So I can't tell you how appreciative I am of JC, but I really wanted to go over to KC specifically because, well, JC's the one who first really put me on to understanding truly what this whole THCA phenomenon is. So I went over to KC. I talked to not only JC, the owner of Dr. Smoke, but I also talked to some other folks. He took me around to some THCA cultivation, sites, and it was super interesting. So check this out.
Yeah. So it was the end of 2018, right? Yeah. At the end of 2018, there's a farm bill. I see the path. I see that, okay, now there's a way to be part of this flower and pay taxes and maybe like get some sort of an ecosystem bill, right? Of like this medicine in the community that I live in. So like out the gate, I just want to affect the people around me, right? Just like the core group of Iowans that lived around me. Like if I could just get the medicine, dude, I'm successful. And so yeah, just on a whim, spent like the last 7 racks I had to secure a really beautiful location downtown. Raised another 5K just with inventory and started white labeling my own full spec CBD bottles with terpenes that I picked the terpenes. And I sat in the store by myself and slowly, like one by one, people would walk by. Like we're downtown Des Moines, Iowa, like prohibition capital of Iowa. Like it's just, Iowa's not down with cannabis. They're just not. Cops aren't down with it, sheriffs aren't down with it, community shuns it, but there's a big culture there. Like a super big underground culture, and I saw it. And I was like, these people deserve, like, they're so hungry for just some sort of just acceptance in the community, right? And next thing I know, it's like, one by one, they started coming in, and the soccer moms would tell their soccer mom friends, and the church people would tell their church people, and next thing you know, I'm selling THC edibles to your grandma. And it's awesome, because she comes back, and she's like, for the first time in next 7 years, I've slept. The first time in 20 years I've got a full night's sleep. And I'm hearing these like stories that are fucking life-changing. Like to hear like a 70-year-old woman tell you it's the first good sleep she's had in years, that changes lives, right? Like now she can be like a good grandma, fucking do what grandmas do, or just live her life a little bit better. And that shit was just awesome. Like and they'd be like, am I gonna get arrested? They were like so nervous. It was
How do you explain something like that? Like just to somebody walking
I just said I wouldn't be sitting here not handcuffed if this was legal in Iowa. You realize if I was breaking the law, where I'm downtown, I'm a block away from the big police station. Like they could walk over and arrest me. This isn't some like trap you on camera shit. Like this is like, do you want some really good medicine? Here it is. And it really resonated. The community really supported it.
Yeah, you had like people around the block. That
Yeah, man, it was wild. Yeah, especially when the derivatives came about. Like, people were so hungry for any sort of THC. They didn't care what the derivative was. They didn't even know. They were so uneducated. all they saw was THC, and they knew that they hadn't been able to have access to it, and now they were legally able to have access to it. And they responded. You know, there was overwhelming support from the community, and I knew as soon as like the first person put THCA products out and tested the market, I was like, it's fucking on. It's on. This is what they've been waiting for. This is what they were all waiting for. They're already smoking THCA concentrates. Like if you're smoking any sort of cold press, you know, like anything that's not heated in the process of extracting it, you're smoking THCA. There's no chemical synthesis. There's only decarboxylation. You literally are just releasing a CO2 molecule. That's it. You're carboxylating it. Very simple.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And so yeah, they're really good, man. And I realized that this is a legitimate market. Like this hemp-derived cannabinoids thing, it's a real deal. Like I don't have to worry about a 100-mile radius around my shop. I have a vast network of people that need medicine.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just
federally legal.
It's that equalizer, dude, for a lot of places that don't have
opportunity
or don't have the like.
Or even a saturated market. Like most of my products come in from California, like coming from Oregon, coming from recreational
places
states.
That have been kind of decimated. We're starting to get decimated.
And so these guys realized, like, wait, if a quarter or half of my genetics were already federally compliant, holy fuck, like we can just bring in more genetics that are federally compliant and make products. And a lot of guys stayed away from it at first because they just didn't know, right? THCA, are you sure? Like, I'd hear from the industry, like, are you sure we can do this? I'm like, oh yeah. It is not it's not carboxylated.
Yeah.
It's not carboxylated.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge thing. Once it gets carboxylated, just make sure your shit doesn't fucking hit that 0.03 and above.
It's the dough. You want to make sure the dough comes red.
Right? And so there's lots of innovative guys that figured out, get the right genetics. The only problem is it just makes things super murky for the recreational legal side. Like this is a big thorn in their side.
It is.
It's a big thorn in their side. And I understand, man. You spend all this time getting licensed. I get it. That sucks. And then somebody can come in and just like mail the product to your state or whatever. Like I get it. That's what our country was founded on, unfortunately. And
they have the choice.
They would have taken the opportunity had they been given it. I get it, you wanted to get in the cannabis industry and I commend you for all the work, but like I'll sit down with like dispensary owners all over the United States, you know what I mean? Most of these guys, like there's a few that are 100% built it from the ground up and own it all and are doing amazing things. And then there's a majority that couldn't survive the big corporate money coming in and infiltrating the system. Because the system's gamed.
Yeah,
cannabis is a game. And the thing that's beautiful about our industry, and I hope the cannabis industry doesn't try to kill it, which they already are, but I hope they don't kill it because this is opportunity. This allows for anybody to get a good product to market. Just one thing. It could be the best gummy, just do one gummy. Like if you have the best 50 milligram D9 edible, like it's just a gourmet, you can have it just one little tiny kitchen or a little ghost kitchen and build like a really good brand, get it lab tested, and start building your brand. I've seen 100 guys do that, 100 girls do that. They just literally start with a little idea of just one company, do one product, do it really well.
Hey, and big shouts out to our friends at Dr. Smoke again. I can't tell you guys enough how thankful I am for, their sponsorship over the last, past year. Without them, I don't think we'd be able to do what we've been doing. So thank you guys so much. Big shouts out to JC. And remember, guys, go to drsmoke.com. Use my discount code LMC15. You're going to get 15% off your entire order. Anyways, big shouts out to Dr. Smoke. Big shouts out to you, JC. I appreciate y'all a lot. So, folks, there you have it. THCA, there's a lot of controversy around it. There's a lot of people thinking it's this or that. Well, we know what it is now. At the end of the day, either adapt or die. I think for folks that are on the West Coast, that are in the markets, that have already had legalization, I think it would be stupid to not embrace THCA and make the most of it. Because in a lot of ways, right, this is probably the most likely path to legalization fully. And this is probably how legalization should go in a lot of ways. THCA is literally what you've been smoking your whole life. It's regular weed. I think a lot more people are gonna jump on the THCA bandwagon now, which they should. That's what I'm doing to a certain degree. But let the games begin. Let the games begin. Now, folks, if you guys haven't subscribed to the streaming platform, guys, go over to www.highdesign.media. Go sign up. There's a free version. I highly recommend that you guys go pay for the paid monthly version. It's about $4.99 a month. You're gonna get access, early access to videos like this. You're gonna get access to a bunch of unreleased interviews, unreleased content, stuff that I'm only gonna keep on that platform. Go support, helps the team quite a bit as well, so it means a lot. Anyways, guys, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for rocking with me, making it to the end of this video. Make sure to go follow us on all the social medias. The links are down below in the description. Make sure to join the newsletter, by the way. That's coming out here every week now. Definitely join that. It's free $99 to do that. And I really appreciate you guys all. Anyways, this is LMC, signing out.